Dear friends, welcome to day 3 of the OncoAlert Spotlight Forum, focusing on patient advocacy. We developed this forum as a yearly follow-up to the OncoAlert Colloquium to place our focus in areas where there are unmet needs, to let us know how oncology is practiced in the entirety of the world, and most importantly, to make us aware that there are geographic unfairness and extend an invitation to you to join and do something about it. Today, we have presentations highlighting patient advocacy. We thank all of our presenters who are all part of the Onco Alliance who have made this forum possible. So without further delay, day 3 of the Spotlight Forum.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jill Feldman, a lung cancer patient and advocate and a co-founder of the EGFR Resistors Patient Group. My disclosures: I have lung cancer and I am a person of privilege. When we talk about health equity in cancer care, it's important to note that while there are global disparities, the definition of disparities are local and unique to the country, state, city, and community. Hearing the words "you have cancer" is one of those things you can't understand unless you've experienced it, but I want you to think about your life. Now, imagine you are going about your everyday life and suddenly you are drop-kicked into a foreign country. You don't speak the language, the culture is unfamiliar, you don't know what's expected of you, you aren't familiar with the terrain, and you don't have a map. Yet, you need to figure out how to survive. Now, imagine how different the outcomes would be for those who have a navigator and can easily access resources compared to those who have to navigate the foreign territory without any help. Cancer is a disease that can affect anyone, but not everyone has a navigator or can easily access resources. Since 2015, the FDA has approved more than 25 new treatment approaches for lung cancer, including combination therapies and expanded approvals. I got involved in advocacy in 2001 after losing my parents and other loved ones to lung cancer. At the time, lung cancer was considered the invisible disease with little awareness and negligible funding for research. When I was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2009, research was finally moving in the right direction, and it continues to rapidly progress with new discoveries and more and better treatment options. Over the past 20 years, I have witnessed and celebrated the creation of a lung cancer community, and I have personally benefited from many of the advancements in research. I am grateful that my path was different than my parents, and I am hopeful for the future. But it's disturbing and just plain wrong that my good fortune is mainly a result of luck. Simply stated, I was lucky to be born into a white, middle-class family in the United States. Even more upsetting is that I represent only about 20% of people with lung cancer, the 20% who benefit from these treatment approaches. Despite all the advancements in all cancers, there are still vast disparities both in the United States and worldwide. They are rooted in a history of discrimination and systemic exclusion that has prevented specific communities from accessing and receiving the care they need. If we use the iceberg graphic as an analogy to depict the many layers of the patient community, you can see the engaged, educated, and empowered patients are only the tip of the iceberg. These are the patients who are likely to have access to and receive best treatments, participate in online communities, and join clinical trials. The majority of patients are below the waterline and deal with much difficulty in being seen and included, with a decreasing level of inclusivity that accompanies the patient populations that are submerged deeper in the ocean. And we must recognize that each layer of the iceberg does not, in fact, represent a singular construct of disparity. We have to use the lens of intersectionality to understand how each of the layers intersect and interact with each other to create an incredibly complex environment that creates and perpetuates health disparities. For example, on this slide, we look at recent lung cancer statistics in the US, and you see that combining poverty data with race and ethnicity highlights the intersectionality of these two constructs to identify our most vulnerable patients with lung cancer. Health insurance coverage in the US is one of the largest barriers to healthcare access, and having health insurance is strongly correlated with better patient health outcomes. Compared to privately insured patients in the US, you can see on this slide that those on Medicaid or other public insurance are significantly less likely to receive any systemic treatments, at 22% less likely. Specifically, 43% are less likely to receive certain combination treatments, and 30% are less likely to receive TKIs. Another area of disparities that is often ignored is supportive care. Prior studies suggest that communication with minority patients about prognosis, treatment options, and advanced care planning is suboptimal, which is a major barrier to the use of supportive care. The assessment and treatment of pain management is disproportionate among racial and ethnic minority groups, including access to pain medication and sometimes even the use of wrong medications for those in neighborhoods that are less likely to have adequate supply. There is an immediate need for interventions that address the disparities, which are complex and reflect social and economic inequities more than just biological differences. Looking at the iceberg graphic, there is a wide range of research documenting health disparities across numerous disparate, vulnerable, and underserved populations. However, understanding why these disparities persist, and more importantly, how they can be fixed to equalize and improve patient care in the real world setting, has not been well documented, especially given that these disparities are pronounced at several levels. As our communities become more diverse, it is increasingly important to recognize and address health disparities in all underserved communities. But we have to take a closer look at the system. On this slide, think about the tree as proxy for the system. It is bent to benefit only some populations. It's important to know that equality and equity are not interchangeable. They may sound the same, but implementation of one versus the other can lead to dramatically different outcomes for minorities. Equality means each person has the same resources or opportunities. In this case, the same size ladder. But even with equal support, reaching the fruit remains unequal. Equity means each person receives resources and opportunities based on their individual need. In this case, the exact size ladder needed to reach the fruit, an equal outcome. But from an actual justice standpoint, you have to look at the tree and first, acknowledge it is bent. Second, ask the vital question of why it is bent. And third, start the conversation on how to unbend it. Just fixing it isn't the correct answer. Thankfully, social justice is deservedly a hot topic, and we will no doubt continue to dominate strategic thinking in 2021. There are major efforts addressing diversity, inclusion, and equity on the federal level and from many leading institutions, but on their own, they won't eliminate disparities. While the major efforts are critical, many are failing to address the underlying persistent social injustices and determinants of health, including family, structural, financial, social, cultural, etc. Having access to quality care, clinical trials, or biomarker testing means nothing if people don't understand their options or if they don't have the proper support and resources, such as insurance, transportation, time off work, or childcare. There have been successful efforts to address support. The Greensboro Health Disparities Collaborative partnered with 2 cancer centers to test whether customized supports can improve the experiences of Blacks undergoing treatment for early stage breast and lung cancer. Specially trained nurse navigators worked with patients to ensure they understood their treatment options and had financial and social supports. Before the study, Blacks were less likely to complete treatment than whites. But after the study, treatment completion rates increased among all patients, but they increased more in the intervention group, and more Blacks than whites completed treatment. Personalized supports provided equity. But ultimately, no single injustice can be addressed in isolation or in silos. And many health inequities persist even after controlling for socioeconomic factors. For example, there can be 2 people with the same insurance going to the same facility, seeing the same doctor for the same condition, and still have different outcomes. Implicit biases are real. We all have them, but that doesn't make us a bad person. There's a lot we don't have control over, but we can address our implicit biases. What we can't do is ignore them. Regardless of what industry or sector we are in, and regardless of whether our individual jobs or whether we are in a position of power, we are all part of the health equity ecosystem, and we can all provoke change and make a difference. I like to think of it like the butterfly effect. A localized change in a complex system can have large effects everywhere. But change doesn't come from a place of comfort. People are very comfortable talking about disparities caused by external factors such as governmental policies and historical injustices, but much less comfortable discussing race and discrimination that are personal and that come within. Real change starts with self-awareness. It requires every one of us to take an honest look at ourselves, and then we can start to have bigger conversations. I was at an advocacy summit last January, and one of the sessions was on disparities in cancer care. During the Q&A, I asked the presenters what the best way would be to reach underserved communities like theirs to ensure people had certain educational materials and other resources that they needed. One presenter looked at me and asked, "How do you know what they need?" I was beyond humbled. There was a lot I didn't know and still don't know. I got a quick lesson on cultural humility, which is very different than cultural competence. Cultural competence says, "I'm the expert." Cultural humility says, "You're the expert." Cultural humility recognizes that every culture is unique and there are a lot of things we don't know. In fact, we don't know what we don't know. We must incorporate cultural humility into cancer care to foster equity and inclusion. We can't make our own culture the standard. We have to take steps to understand each person in their own cultural context. What we see and hear depends a good deal on where we are standing. Sometimes what we think we see can be very different from what others see. You can't help a person if you don't understand them or know what they need, what their community needs. The context in which people live must be considered. Federal reparations provide a framework to mitigate disparities, but true systemic change is a team sport. I implore you to look at your own implicit biases, recognize them, and work to dismantle them. Physicians are an important part of the team and at the heart of working towards social justice in healthcare. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Incorporate cultural humility into your work. Black people are not a monolith. The LGBTQ plus community is not a monolith. I'm Jewish, and I can tell you that Jewish people are not a monolith. And it's okay to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. The important part is to acknowledge them and then keep moving forward. And remember the butterfly effect. One small change can have a big impact on the future. And please do what's right, not what's easy. We need to speak up and speak out. Indifference and silence only perpetuate injustice. Health equity must be a priority, not an outcome. I don't understand what it's like to be a minority, and I understand that I will never understand, but I can and I will stand. I urge everyone to stand with me. Take a pledge and commit to self-reflection, to acknowledging disparities exist, to embedding a health equity lens into all of your initiatives and programs, to practice cultural humility, and to prioritize people over profits in your institutions. In the words of JFK, every accomplishment starts with the decision to try. Today, I am asking you to make the decision to try. I am asking you to stand, and I am asking you to join me and shoulder the burden of knowing, the burden of lives that depend on us. And as John Lewis said, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you.
The genesis of KidneyCan is from a collaboration of clinicians and scientists and caregivers and patients and doctors and researchers. But while KidneyCan is a US organization, the need to accelerate cures is worldwide. So we're happy to be here today as OncoAlert shares KidneyCan's mission to bring the best and brightest together to cure cancer.
You may not personally know someone with kidney cancer, but probably one of your friends has had it, or their friends or loved one has had it. It's not particularly rare, but these less common cancers also need studied. In the case of kidney cancer, it makes for a fantastic model for other cancers. And so advocating for this goes beyond just the one individual type of tumor. You're really advocating for cancer care and cancer research in general when you're advocating for kidney cancer.
Ralph and Brenda Knapp live in Virginia Beach and started a nonprofit charitable organization called Kidney Cancer Coalition. Their nonprofit was founded to privately fund new and interesting ideas in kidney cancer research. And I had heard about Ralph through Smart Patients, an online community of kidney cancer patients. And I knew a little bit about him. And one thing led to another, and we had a conversation where they were experts and I knew about their fundraising capabilities. And I had the legislative advocacy policy piece going on. And it made sense to me, if we put the two together, 1 + 1 could equal 3. And so through dialogue and discussions with the Knapps, we decided to host a doctor roundtable in Virginia Beach. We invited some of the doctors, leading doctors in kidney cancer research, and some of the industry participants together to talk about the future. After we received the $10 million for Kidney Cancer Research Program, the dedicated funding for kidney cancer through the government, I realized that we needed a way to amplify what was going on in that program. We realized that these funds that were being given out through the Kidney Cancer Research Program, the people were not talking to one another. Not intentionally, they weren't talking to each other. That was the germination of the idea of let's convene these people at a summit and bring them together to tell one another what they're doing. That idea then morphed and grew where several other institutions wanted to get involved and hear about this.
We took the opportunity and we held our first Kidney Cancer Research Summit in 2019. When KidneyCan was only about a year old, we had the opportunity to meet with some doctors and hear some of their ideas about what they wanted. And one of the things they felt a need for was a meeting focused on the kind of research KCRP is funding, the translational and the basic science research.
We want to find alternative source of fundings and get the brightest and most successful mind together. Therefore, KCRS 19 was launched. And hopefully we will build on this because together, patient advocates, scientist, clinician, industry collaborator, anyone that has an interest, government agencies, can team up against this disease that will, in no time, have no hope to kill people.
We had a very successful first summit where we brought 150 of the thought leaders in kidney cancer together and had them share and collaborate and network around what they were doing and what they could do more of together. Our two organizations have come together and we're stronger together now that we're one organization where we have an emphasis on advocacy and we have an emphasis on research and generating research funding. If that's through advocacy or through private means or through our summit, everything's driving for helping researchers go down that pathway towards a cure.
I think it's one of the most exciting things I've ever participated in. We are bringing together clinicians, physician scientists, bench scientists to talk about kidney cancer research. The goal is to really continue to invigorate the science and breakthroughs that we want to achieve in kidney cancer by bringing young people in, by forging collaborations.
This meeting is brilliant in that it brings together scientists and clinicians from various disciplines who are all focused on treating kidney cancer and coming up with cures for kidney cancer, to come up with new projects and new ideas, new grants, and new treatments for kidney cancer.
One of the things that's emerging is that we're creating fourth and fifth buckets of treatment that might really introduce new pathways and new mechanisms of action that are going to be really promising for kidney cancer patients.
I have never experienced such a enthusiastic and incredibly collaborative spirit that is coming out of this meeting. And this is really what we need, because we are in an era in which each of us is extremely specialized in a field, and I think working together we can definitely make advances that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
The Kidney Cancer Research Summit gave me hope. It reminded me of the great heights that driven individuals can reach and made me appreciate the many talented and dedicated people working on the problem that threatens my own life. I'm now able to see the extraordinary effort happening because I'm personally impacted by it. And by talking about all the work that patient advocates are doing, quietly but with persistent determination, I hope that I'm able to do my own part in this group effort that calls for all hands on deck.
I think the number one thing that we've heard from this summit, not to mention the electricity and the excitement that was around the event when people were together, is this is one of the first forums where basic scientists, research laboratory folks, clinicians, patient advocates, folks across the spectrum, industry partners, government, have all been in the same room talking and sharing and hearing about what we can do more of together rather than in individual silos.
We have made progress, but when I see a patient and the patient asks me how they're going to be cured and if they're not curable, and I tell them, oh wow, we have this combination of drug with or without surgery and this can make you live longer, I don't think that's enough.
While so many doctors and researchers are working tirelessly on behalf of the kidney cancer community, so are advocates. With their personal stories and their strong voices, they're helping to raise awareness, and they're helping to secure and increase research funding for kidney cancer.
I became involved in advocacy efforts when I learned how much is needed in the research and how those research dollars that we can garner will help me and my fellow patients.
What strikes me about those I've met in the kidney cancer community is the personal will to do something. The disease eliminates so much of our sense of agency that we thirst for the ability to make any kind of difference, and we're beginning to realize that we may be stronger together.
With anything, it first starts by raising awareness. When you raise awareness, tend to attract money. Money tends to attract smart people, and smart people can solve problems.
Historically, kidney cancer has been terribly underfunded, so there's an urgent need for new research dollars. In 4 short years, we've raised $135 million of new research funding by mobilizing a grassroots army focused on kidney cancer. We've seen a huge growth in trials and drug approvals, as well as an increase in investigators pursuing this research. Dr. Andrew Smith, a clinician scientist who specializes in kidney cancer research, is a great example. He's a recent award recipient of a kidney cancer research program grant through the US government.
This program really starts with the patient. We identify problems and we see where therapies are working and where there are problems. And there's actually a lot more problems than there are solutions. And so that's why the Kidney Cancer Research Program is founded upon this mechanism to identify these areas and have scientists and physicians come up with solutions that ultimately will touch the patient. It could be a new drug, it could be a new way of looking at therapy, it could be a new type of surgery, lots of different avenues and forms of innovation.
Even having gone through medical school, I never truly understood what it meant that there were popular and unpopular cancers. I couldn't feel the impact of that until I was diagnosed myself with kidney cancer and noticed the impact of being inadequately funded. As an academic physician, I know firsthand that funding opportunities are the lifeblood of scientific progress.
I think everyone from patient to the caregivers to the physicians has the same mission, and I think this is very important. And our mission is we want to raise awareness for kidney cancer research, and we want to cure this cancer.
When patients, physicians, industry, and government come together to collaborate, the potential to accelerate a cure becomes real. KidneyCan has been honored to participate in the progress in this community. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the KidneyCan team, as well as thank the entire kidney cancer community. Now it's time for you to join the global conversation and connect with us and others to discuss kidney cancer areas of unmet need and current research and development projects. Support organizations like KidneyCan and others who are doing the work to increase research funding and connect researchers globally. And also encourage patient enrollment in clinical trials whenever you can. We're grateful to be a part of this OncoAlliance. Thank you, Gil. Appreciate this opportunity. Stay healthy and safe.
Hello, everyone. Thanks to Dr. Gil Morgan and OncoAlert for inviting us to participate in the first OncoAlert Spotlight Forum. Our organization, Paltown, is a nonprofit dedicated to patient communities. Our first community, Colin, serves over 5,700 colorectal cancer patients and caregivers. We are thrilled to be part of the OncoAlliance. I'm Nancy Siebold, the COO of Paltown.
And I'm Manju George, the Scientific Director of Paltown. And our talk today is titled Empowered Patients, Powerful Partners in Care.
When we talk about empowered patients, we begin with the premise that empowerment is rooted in education. Educated patients affect the healthcare ecosystem in multiple ways. Perhaps most visibly, patients talking about their disease on social media directly increases disease awareness. In colorectal cancer, we see educated patients boosting screening, as in these examples. Timely screening in CRC literally saves lives. March was CRC Awareness Month, and many patient organizations like ours used their social media platforms to bring personal stories to a broader audience. This is a very effective way to spread disease awareness. Educated patients are able to utilize healthcare resources better. So while in treatment, patients who are aware of the expected side effects are proactive with their care teams about getting the support that will enable them to complete therapy regimens. And this, of course, leads to better outcomes. Patient demand for newer tests, procedures, and treatments move the field forward. In many cancers, patient-educated registries are making new data sets available to researchers and answering questions of value to both patients and clinicians. More broadly, patient advocacy organizations provide substantial support for research. Educated patients stay educated. As survivors, they're invested in the choices that can support long-term health, reducing the burden on the healthcare system as a whole, whether that's surveillance or diet and lifestyle changes. And educated patients bring their voices to clinical trial design. This is something somewhat new, but this interaction leads to trials that attract and retain more participants, which of course speeds the entire trial process. Dr. George has worked with several trial teams on patient-centric design with very positive results. So educated patients can have far-reaching impacts on disease awareness, screening, healthcare utilization, outcomes, and even clinical trial design. But how does becoming a student of your disease help individual patients? So we know that patient education leads to patient empowerment. Informed patients have better chances of survival. Learning about their cancer gives them goals and a sense of control in a situation which can often feel very chaotic. Educated patients receive better care. They seek out second opinions, care at specialized cancer centers, they enroll in clinical trials, and educated patients are able to manage their own care better. Prompt and timely interactions with their care team allows the most efficacious care. Most of these benefits are well documented, but there are significant barriers to effective patient education, both individually and at scale. The first is emotional. A cancer diagnosis is a period of intense emotional upheaval. At diagnosis, a lot of information is thrust onto patients and caregivers, but they are often overwhelmed and unable to grasp most of it. The second is educational. Patients and caregivers have widely varying education levels, and even when they're highly educated, they lack any experience with medicalese. And there's time. Providers, of course, have extremely limited time available to explain the details of diagnosis and care. Patients and caregivers often feel talked at and unable to comprehend all the words flying at them. And finally, trust. Overwhelmed patients in rushed clinical encounters are ill-equipped to develop the trust that they need to take the information on board effectively, much less to feel comfortable and heard. So we're proposing that patient communities are the answer to these barriers. Patients and caregivers in patient communities can engage on their own time and their own schedule, not during a clinical encounter or on the clock. The information can be tailored. The patient communities really meet the patient where they're at. They bring an intuitive understanding of the barriers and the learning curve because they've gone through that same thing themselves. The education in a community comes contextualized with psychosocial support, and that makes it much more effective when it's delivered in tandem with those kinds of support aspects. And finally, the culture and the values of a community can instill the importance of learning just as a value. If all of my neighbors are learning about their disease and sharing how that helped them communicate with their teams and make decisions, I might be more amenable to giving that a try. So let's look at the Colintele model, where experiential wisdom, as we like to say, is shared one post at a time. Colintele provides dedicated groups, or neighborhoods as we call them, catering to all aspects of the CRC experience, from stages to treatments to the concerns of caregivers. Each group is led by a trained admin living that particular experience. So the stage 4 group, for example, is only stage 4 patients, and it's led by a trained admin who is a stage 4 patient. In the community, there's a particular focus on both disease education and on clinical trials information. After being in Colintele for a short period of time, Colintele members often report that their medical teams are impressed with their knowledge. They become much more efficient at shared decision-making with their care team.
Let's look at a sample journey of an early stage colorectal cancer patient on their own and while they're in Colintele. We see that most of the early stage patients know very little about their diagnosis or treatment. Typically, most of them don't even know their MMR status, and they're given one treatment plan. The side effect management is minimal and is highly dependent on the care team for any information, and it also varies widely from center to center. And post-treatment, it again depends on the individual patients, and many times they don't even know the frequency at which they get scans. Once an early stage CRC patient is in Colin Town, they learn the basics of CRC and treatment. We have this neighborhood called CRC 101 that ensures that they know their MMR status, and they learn about all the different modalities of treatment, and they learn specialized things like watch and wait for rectal cancer. And even for early stage patients, we encourage them to seek a second opinion. As far as side effect management is concerned, patient experts provide detailed information on many strategies. For example, icing during oxaliplatin is found to significantly reduce acute cold sensitivity, and then information about growth factor use when patients have low blood counts, dose reduction when it's needed, use of vaginal dilators after radiation therapy. And then we often counsel patients that they should seek out mental health resources early on in their treatment journey, and then how to follow treatment responses with their tumor markers. And then we also provide information about rare side effects such as DPD deficiency. And after treatment, there is a lot of in-depth discussion about surveillance options, including the newer tests like ctDNA. And there is also discussion about trials for surveillance, and then lifestyle and diet changes, and trials that are focused on prevention. And here is the journey for a late stage CRC patient. We find that most often they're told that they're on chemo for life or are terminal. And when they're advised about clinical trials, it is often very late in their journey. And most often they're only given information about trials at their own centers. A CRC patient who is part of Colin Town is often encouraged to think about their goals of care and help figure out long-term and short-term goals of treatment. And then as far as treatment side effect management, we encourage them to seek out second opinions, strategize to get the best treatments available, and take measures to reduce the side effects, because most often they're on treatments for a longer time period, and so that they can take measures to preserve quality of life and body condition. And when they're present with oligometastatic disease, we advise them for interventional options and to think about clinical trials early. And those that get to NED, we offer them, Colin Town offers them advice on the best surveillance options out there. And so how do we do this? How is patient education done in Colin Town? We identify engaged and interested members. We send them to oncology meetings, and then so when they come back, they report the information back to the community. We foster a lot of discussions and strategizing about how to get the best treatment. We engage conversations with leading doctors. We solicit talks about trials and the latest in the field of CRC oncology. We develop collaborations with sister organizations and pharmaceutical companies, and develop training programs such as the Empowered Patient Leadership Workshop, Trial Navigator Training, and these programs are focused on education and learning. So we also create content in patient-friendly language, and in our communities we direct people often to curated educational material and make the information easy to find. We create topics, use tags, and the moderators tag specific experts for specialized comments. We create standards and guidelines, and we filter almost all the posts and moderate them so that we keep track of any kind of misinformation that may be spread in the community. We create avenues for interactive talks and in-person meetings, and for the exchange of information between patients and providers. And thus we are able to increase the level of education of folks in Colin Town.
So at the same time, the members of Colin Town really have created a disease education powerhouse. So by combining the education focus with a community environment, we've seen just a tremendous number of things that have come out of that. So for example, patients routinely attend major conferences. You can see a bunch of us there at the last ASCO meeting that was in person in 2019. And then of course they bring all of that information, as Manju said, back to the community. Community members have developed a protocol that was presented at ASCO for mitigating a common side effect of oxaliplatin treatment. And they now regularly work with PIs to develop patient-friendly trials. And they've developed the Second Opinion Project, which directly supports stage 4 CRC patients to seek those second opinions. That helps mitigate some of the financial expenses. These are all projects that were created and, in the case of the Second Opinion Project, funded by the families of CRC patients. And they've created a project to track patient participation in clinical trials. This is a teeny snapshot of it, but we're tracking over 200 patients recently in terms of what the participation on the trial is and what the outcomes were. And this creates a really powerful data set for patients coming behind them who want to participate in clinical trials. So really the key takeaways from the Colintele model in our experience over the past several years is that this community of educated patients has created a transformative learning experience for the patients and caregivers in the community. It's assisted thousands of patients in their own personal journeys with CRC. Through its community learning mindset, we fostered learning and discussion, that touches every member of the community. And we found innovative ways to work with key stakeholders, facilitating a two-way flow of information, not just between individual patients and their care teams, but between patients and the oncology treatment and research ecosystem as a whole. So in this way, we hope that we are changing the CRC oncology world for the better while creating better outcomes for our patients and caregivers. Thank you so much for listening to our talk about empowered patients and how they have become powerful partners in care. We hope that if you have any questions about Colintele or the model or the way in which our programs are creating empowered and educated patients, that you'll reach out to Manju on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is here at the bottom and on every slide. And we can talk to you about our experiences and how we've seen the thousands of patients in our community really step up and change the way that they interact with their care teams and through their cancer journey.
We thank you all for your support and look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we discuss racial disparities. From all of us at OncoAlert, thank you for your support.